Thank you. Hello all. I'm John Brown, a director at Pagepark Architects in Glasgow, and thank you to the Art Nouveau network for the invitation to speak to you all today about the Mackintosh Building. A topic that's very dear to my heart, and I know very dear to the hearts of many people in this room. As far as Art Nouveau heritage in Europe goes, the current challenges facing the building truly are extraordinary and require our collective attention and efforts. I'd like to very quickly start by introducing our practice. Pagepark was established in 1981 by David Page and Brian Park and became an influential practice in Scotland through the 90s and early 2000s. The practice is now an employee-owned business in its second generation of leadership. The practice has always carefully blended conservation and design, and it was this blend of creativity and conservation knowledge that ultimately led us to be involved in the reconstruction of the Mackintosh Building after the fire in 2014. Before we think about the current dilemma of the building, I'd like to first step back in time to Glasgow in 1897, when Mackintosh was first penning his designs for the school. To fully understand the Mackintosh Building, we must understand the context in which it was created. Glasgow boomed in the 19th century, becoming an industrial powerhouse referred to as the second city of the British Empire. It was the fourth largest city in the world at the time. The local abundance of coal and iron to power heavy industry, coupled with its strategic geographic position, made it a prime location for the construction of ships and other heavy machinery. The location of the Mackintosh Building is highlighted here in red, at the heart of the tightly packed Victorian urban grid, laid out as part of the rapid expansion of the city through the 19th century. At the turn of the century, Glasgow was building 20% of the world's ships. In 1907, whilst John Brown's shipyard, not my shipyard, but another John Brown shipyard, was testing the engines of the Lusitania, the largest cruise liner the world had ever seen, Mackintosh was drafting plans for his masterpiece, the Glasgow School of Art. This was a city with no shortage of ambition. Fitting out ships like Lusitania required an industry of exquisite craftsmanship. This image shows the women of the Templeton's famous carpet factory, supplier to the Titanic and royal palaces across the globe. The city had a skilled workforce of artisans and craftspeople, making every manufactured product imaginable to us today. The importance of the cultural economy and artisan output of the city had been recognised in 1844 with the establishment of the School of Design. Government-sponsored and funded by leading shipbuilders and manufacturers, it was described as an excellent means of improving art and ornamental design and advancing manufacturing. The school provided an abundance of night classes affordable to the artisan class. By 1896, the now Glasgow School of Art required a new building, and an anonymous design competition was held. An entry by the offices of Honeyman and Keppie, where Mackintosh worked as a draftsman, was the ultimate winner of the competition. The brief called for a simple building, with the items in red pulled from the brief. What is required is a building with classrooms that is conveniently arranged and well lighted. The school museum need not be a special room, but might be a feature in connection with the staircase. The accommodation on the north side should be, as far as possible, rigidly kept for classrooms. The south elevation may not have any lights or windows in its walls, in line with the building line, except perhaps on the upper floors. Mackintosh, like all architects, gave a written response to this brief, where he maybe stretched the truth slightly. It has been the endeavour to make the building express the purpose for which it is intended by a frank acceptance of the requirements and a moulding of these into such form as we think has produced a result which is pleasing in proportion and in which the useless expenditure of money on mere embellishments has played no part. Anyone who knows the building may question that. In some ways, though, Mackintosh did design a relatively plain building, and you can clearly read the specifications of the brief in his design. Simple north-facing studios, I must say north is at the bottom of the plan here. Simple north-facing studios, a central museum with feature stair, wide corridors for the display of art, limited windows to the south, but with a clever stepped plan to introduce the opportunity for light wells. The unified appearance of this as-built plan disguises the fact that the building was actually completed in two phases, the eastern half being completed in 1897 and the western half over 10 years later in 1909. The apparent plainness of the building breaks down when the section is revealed. What is a simple 4-storey building to the north becomes over 10 levels when half landings and mezzanines to the south are considered. Due to the topography of the site, the building breaks down into a playful range of volumes that creates a building that transforms vertically in character and complexity. The imposing north elevation is mostly glazed, creating impeccable lighting conditions for painting. And in the south facade, the rhythm completely breaks down into an eclectic and playful range of openings. It is in the east and west elevations, however, that the stylistic development of Mackintosh as an architect is most evident. The building is simultaneously his first and last major work, and is therefore autobiographical in nature. The elevation to the east, while still an impressive composition, plays with the references of Scottish vernacular architecture embellished with Art Nouveau styling. The western elevation, on the other hand, is a strikingly original composition, geometric in nature with little decorative embellishment. This is a comparison between the western elevation as designed in 1897 compared to the as-built proposal, which shows the remarkable development of design confidence in Mackintosh over the period. The following slides I'm going to flick through without much commentary for the purposes of time, but these are a set of photographs from 1910 of the completed building taken by renowned photographer Bedford-Lemaire. This is showing the museum on the first floor, the director's office at the centre of the building, a basement workshop studio with top light, the lecture theatre, the junior architecture rooms on the ground floor, his famous library from the principal floor and from the mezzanine at the west, facing the famous windows, the loggia on the attic floor, looking out over the city, and the temple-like Studio 58 at the top of the West Tower. If we zoom forward in time again to 2010, 100 years after the completion of the building, it is rightly recognised for its design excellence, but more importantly, it's still functioning as an art school with very little adaptation to Mackintosh's original design. The building has inspired generations of graduates, and the school is now internationally recognised. The building is so synonymous with the identity of the school that to study there is affectionately known as studying at the Mack. In 2014, a fire broke out in the western basement of the school, caused by a projector set up as part of a student installation of work. The fire swept through the western parts of the building, destroying the famous library and Studio 58. Significant water damage was caused throughout the building. The school acted quickly after the fire, stabilised the building, and carried out an archaeological record of the ruined remains of the library. My practice, Page Park Architects, were appointed as architects for the reconstruction project in 2015, 1 year after the fire. A full point cloud scan of the fire-damaged building was carried out, which remains the most valuable primary evidence source for the building. This formed the basis of a 3D Revit survey model, which we use for our reconstruction process. At that point in 2015, there were still many unknowns about the building, and evidence had to be gathered to inform the reconstruction. The greatest challenge was the reconstruction of the library, which established our reconstruction process that we used across the building. That process began with rethinking, looking at the knowledge accumulated from research, physical evidence, site surveys, and discussions with specialists and experts on the building, feeding that into reconstruction drawings, which were produced as 3D models. The production of these drawings was part of that rethinking process and continually and going through change. Remaking, we worked with our in-house model maker to make physical models at 1 to 10 of the library and at 1 to 1 of key junctions to test the accuracy of our rethinking process. This was then reviewed with an expert panel every several months. We would have a presentation to the expert panel to review our conclusions and our proposals. Then 1-to-1 prototypes, particularly for the library and other key spaces, were created to test that at a larger scale. And then finally, once we were sure of the accuracy of our findings, the reconstruction took place on site. This process was recorded in 3D in a 3D Revit model. Each element was modelled individually, and the evidence basis for each element was recorded within the model element as a record. While the reconstruction process of the library is often the most interesting topic for discussion, I wanted to share some specific reflections on the process relative to the Turin Declaration. For areas of the building that were only partially damaged or remained undamaged, the following excerpt from the Declaration became relevant. When there is a conflict between preserving the age value and the artistic value of an Art Nouveau monument, one should give higher priority to the artistic value, but with as much respect for the age value as possible. When restoring Art Nouveau architecture, one should be more open to removing later additions, reconstructing the original appearance, than for other monuments, in order to secure the original artistic value. This was an interesting conflict that we had to face. The building had been in use for over 100 years as an art school and did have age value that had to be considered. However, as we were uncovering layers of the building, so many secrets were revealed, particularly original colour and tone that shed light on the original subtlety of the design that had been lost to many years of cheap paint. That in turn had distorted the understanding of Mackintosh's interiors. This was particularly true of the corridors, which had been subject to many years of black gloss paint, generally with good intention, I'm sure. Sampling processes for the original finish suggested that the doors had been stained a rich brown colour. Agreeing, however, to remove all finishes in order to return to the original design intent meant removal of the historic paint record. This was, in our view, justified to reinstate the correct interpretation of the monument. Paint removal to the rough boarded corridors was arguably more successful, as removal of the later layers of paint revealed the original finish below, which could be left as found. Investigations into the historic plaster finish showed that ceilings in the original design had been left self-finished without a paint layer. The project offered the opportunity to reinstate this finish in several areas to great effect. In other areas, the design that existed pre-fire had been heavily altered, with research uncovering the original design intent. The glazed corridor to the top floor was found to originally have had a timber-gridded roof structure and been stained dark rather than the black and white painted scheme that had existed pre-fire. It was unanimously agreed by the client and the design team that this should be reconstructed to the original design to, I think, great effect. On the 15th of June 2018, the unimaginable happened and a second fire broke out in the construction site. The building was closed and secured for the night with no active work taking place. The cause of the fire is unknown, despite forensic investigations. The destruction was too complete for any significant evidence to survive. The fire comprehensively destroyed all elements of the building besides those made of stone, steel and concrete, leaving it essentially as a ruined shell. The building is now consolidated in a ruined state, however requires extensive scaffolding to support it. Even conserving the building to this level has been a Herculean feat, with significant credit due to Liz Davidson and Sarah McKinnon for their tenacity and dedication to the building, even in the bleakest hours post-fire. What now is a good question. It's important to clarify at this point that the next section of the presentation is entirely our thoughts as an architectural practice about how the building might be brought back, and it does not represent the views of the Glasgow School of Art. The school have currently put plans for a reconstruction on hold, pending the outcome of legal proceedings, and are developing a revised business case for a reconstruction. The content of this section has been produced by our practice since the fire, considering solutions about how it may be reconstructed. One of the first questions to consider is, can we reconstruct the building? It's our view that yes, this can be done. As part of our project between 2014 and 2018, we built an accurate 3D model of the building informed by 3D scans, measured surveys and photographic records. The image on the left shows the West Tower as provided to us by a 3D survey company after the first fire, and the image on the right shows the level of detail now included. We have a complete record of the building to inform an accurate reconstruction of the interiors, free of conjecture. There are elements, however, that have not been surveyed and recorded to this degree of detail. One of the biggest challenges what the reconstruction will face will be that of reinstating the decorative stonework. Using the same methodology established for the library reconstruction, each stone must be analysed with photographic, drawn and measured evidence synthesised into a block-by-block model for the whole building. Large-scale mock-ups must be commissioned to perfect the elegance of detailing and subtlety of lines. A more important question, or a more difficult one to answer, may be, should we reconstruct? In our view, yes, the case for reconstruction is as strong as it was in 2014, if not stronger. The building still has a relevant function and a reason to exist. The design is still largely fit for purpose. We know that an accurate reconstruction is technically achievable, and the philosophical justification remains the same. The design instructions exist if we choose to follow them. A pertinent question in the UK, when this building is discussed, is it affordable, or can we afford it? The school was originally built in 2 phases because they could not afford to build it. The east was then followed by the west 10 years later. This could easily happen again, with a full reconstruction of the east while the west remains under protective canopy and is open to the public in its ruined state. This would allow reconstruction methodologies to be firmly tested and perfected for the final phase while funds are raised. As part of our study, we also considered the essential elements of the building that make up the design or the overall experience of the design to consider whether a partial reinstatement in the first instance was viable. We concluded that the soul of the building exists in the dramatic journey through space and light, from the street up through the arched entrance hall, emerging through a forest of timber balustrades into the light-filled canopy of the museum, along the social corridor with stolen views across the city, through the library, a clearing in the woods to rest with a book, up the simple west staircase to the improbable attic vaults of the loggia, emerging to the glazed lantern of the hen run and the timber temple of Studio 58. The building, to us, is a series of journeys and thresholds. We posed the thought that the selective reconstruction of interiors could be viable as long as due consideration was given to the continuity of the experience. Studio spaces beyond may become more robust and functional. This may be a necessary concession to the practicalities of contemporary art practice. How would we rebuild the building to meet regulations? Any new reconstruction would have to face the challenges of accessibility, sustainability, and safety regulations. Access to the building is complex due to the steeply sloping site. Access for students requires improvement, but consideration of tourism and visitors must also be accommodated. We have suggested that a reconstructed building might contain a series of legible interventions that permit visitor flow and student activities to exist in tandem, creating 2 new lift cords and a new ramp designed to bring all people into the building in a democratic manner. With our knowledge of the building, we were able to select locations that would not interfere with the significant elements of the original design, or the impact could be minimised. The building would have to at least attempt to comply with strict contemporary sustainability targets, as it is likely to be considered as new construction under building control regulations. This would be a key threat to the authenticity of the original design, as items such as delicate single-glazed windows would become problematic. We propose that the building might become an exemplar standard to test what can be achieved in such reconstruction conditions. Achieving the balance between thermal upgrade and authentic reconstruction would require significant analysis, a topic that is not currently included in conservation charters. The building now has, sadly, a tragic relationship with fire. However, there are fundamental aspects of the original design that would assist for clever retrofit of improved fire performance. Using the historic separation lines of the building's phased construction, along with new insertions such as firefighting lifts, could greatly enhance the safety of the building. A zero-risk policy in construction would have to be adopted, potentially considering phasing the construction to limit installation of combustible finishes until a functioning fire suppression system is active. To finish, I'd like to consider one of the most remarkable discoveries about the Mackintosh Building. When studying the interiors in detail, it was remarkable how deconstructible as well as constructible the building has the potential to be. Unlike more decorative Art Nouveau buildings, the Mackintosh Building is essentially a kit of parts, timber elements simply nailed or screwed together to create remarkable spatial volumes. During the reconstruction process, a one-to-one prototype of the library was constructed, which remains in storage. This element was used to perfect the design detailing and construction sequencing. This begs the question, why not reconstruct some of the building now as standalone elements? Rooms such as the library could be constructed in a demountable manner for a fraction of the cost of the full building reinstatement and could be exhibited across Europe before finally returning to the building when complete. What a remarkable homage to Mackintosh that would be to see his finest work visit the great cities of Europe to a reception he may only ever have dreamed of. What was being achieved on site prior to the 2018 fire was astounding in quality and craftsmanship, enabled by an enlightened client and a team of passionate people who cared about the project and the building. What must happen now is a reconstruction on a much larger scale, with the same meticulous attention to detail and international scrutiny. As a community, we must continue to champion the importance of this building, despite the weariness we may feel after the events of the last decade. As a school established to train the artisan class, what better training ground for a revival of artisan skill than to faithfully reconstruct the building and let Mackintosh's masterwork inspire generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you so much, John.